Hi, everybody. Welcome to the URX Talent Development Program. We're going to go ahead and get started in a couple minutes. But in the meantime, I wanted to go ahead and see who's on the call today. If you can go ahead and put on the call or on the chat, if you can go ahead and put what school you're calling from, that would be awesome. All right, we have Duke University on the call. And then we also asked just for the speakers to be on camera so that no background noise will be in the session today. Thank you. All right, so we have Tuhina and Annie. All right, so we're all good. I think we have both of our speakers here today. So again, go ahead and put in the chat what school you are from. We have Duke University, University of Washington, UC Riverside. We have University of Texas at Dallas, Illinois Institute of Technology, awesome, University of Florida. And then for Tahina, if you want to go ahead and try sharing your screen so that we can see your awesome presentation. We have the University of Waterloo here.
Jennifer, where would we share our screen? Which little functionality? My teammate Annie is going to be doing it for.
I think I see it. Let me try. Ooh. Can you see?
You got it? Yes, I can see your screen.
Do you see yourself?
I do see myself. And just as a pro tip, go ahead and click twice on Annie's screen so that you can see the video or see her slideshow. Awesome. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody again for attending our university or URX talent development program. Today's session is how to crush your next technical internship or your next full-time role. And today we have Tuhina Das and Annie Chang from Airbnb to speak with you all today. So if you do have any questions, make sure to put them in the chat and they'll make sure to address it after their presentation today. After the Q&A, we'll go ahead and do closing remarks and also announce our winner for the resume review. So I'll go ahead and toss the floor over to Tuhina and Annie. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So great to see all the comments in the chat. Welcome. I'm Tuhina, and I have my awesome teammate Annie here with me. As a quick intro, I've been at Airbnb for a little over 2 years now. I'm a university recruiter. I am super excited to be here and chat with you all. This is our first virtual event of this season, so bear with us. I think it's going to be super exciting, and would love to see chats and commentary on the sidebar here. If you have any questions, definitely keep it coming. And a couple times throughout the presentation, we might even ask you to input some fun stuff in there. So yeah, get ready. Annie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie. I'm an engineer at Airbnb. I've been here almost 3 years now. And yeah, I'm super excited to get started and help you all ace your next engineering opportunity.
Amazing. So for the agenda today, we are going to be talking about a couple different things. We're going to be going over 5 tips for your internship and full-time roles. 5 seems a little small, but trust me, we're going to dive a little deep. We're going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty. We're going to have some resources for you, and hopefully if we have some time, we'll talk a little bit about what Airbnb has been up to and what our plans are for the future. But really the main focus of this time is going to be helping you get some takeaways about how to crush your next opportunity. And if anyone on the call is maybe not an engineer or in some other sort of role, I still think you'll find a lot of this information impactful. So stay with us, ask questions, and we'll be good to go. Let's get into it. Cool. So we're going to talk about your sweet careers. This is really a time for you to either take away some new ideas about how to approach your next opportunity, or for some of you, some of this information might be a refresher. And oftentimes, you know, consistent refreshers on this information is just as important. So hopefully you'll find this valuable. All right, so I wanted to share a little bit of kind of sometimes how we might feel about our internships or going into new grad roles. This GIF was chosen way before this year, but I think coming into 2020, some of us might be feeling a little more like this. But after today, hopefully you'll feel a little more like this baby, right? This baby is vibing. They're having a great time. They have supporters in the background that are cheering on their success. And that's kind of what we want you to be able to feel after today, after hearing some of this information. Cool. All right. So we're going to get right into tip number 1. Oh, also in the chat, I see it's literally like this in Northern California. Great point. Everyone be safe from the fires. Take care of yourselves. Be safe from COVID-19. Hopefully you're all staying healthy. All right, so tip number 1, this is really to set the foundation for our talk, right? We want you to go into a new opportunity by first figuring out your core responsibilities and what your goals are. So let's just, you know, think a little bit for a second about what a software engineering intern or new grad should do. And the skills needed to succeed as an engineer are not always the same skills needed to succeed as a student, right? As an engineer, it's really up to you to drive a lot of your career, to drive ownership of your work, to really proactively lead, to help yourself grow and become as successful as you will be. And, you know, there's lots of actually different skills involved in being an engineer. A lot of times you hear about coding ability. That's what interviewers often test you on. But that is just the tip of the iceberg, right? We have Annie here who's worked at Airbnb for 3 years. She has to do a lot more than just code. She has to know how to learn and adapt to feedback. Prioritization and planning is really important. How are you sort of pacing towards your milestones and keeping on track of your goals? Ownership is a huge part of this, and you're going to hear about this a little bit more throughout the presentation as a theme. But that is actually a piece that I think does resonate with what y'all have been doing as students or in your experience, because you're owning your journey to becoming an intern or a new grad, and that's really important to keep in mind. And then lastly, communication and interpersonal skills. This is huge. A lot of our presentation is going to touch on communication and effectively building those loops of communication and feedback to kind of bolster your success. And the way you do that is getting to know other people, being able to bring people together, fostering relationships that will help you grow. And a lot of that is really important and key to continue leveling you up in your career. Awesome. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about responsibilities. First, we're going to go over what your high-level responsibilities are as an intern or a new grad, right? The first responsibility for you is really driving your project to completion of deliverables. Your main goal at the end of the day should be to make an impact through your work, right? And the way you do that is by proactively managing your milestones through to the end. Next, you want to ask thoughtful and frequent questions. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but when you have a question, especially if you can't find the answer on your own, ask it 1, 2, or 3 times, right? People are around to help. And the more that you ask, the more that you'll uncover and the more people can help you grow. Not every question has to be completely thought out ahead of time, right? As long as you've done a little bit of self-service research and you've come to a point where you're blocked or you have more questions or you have an idea that you want to talk through, bring that to the table. And, you know, I want to caveat all of this by saying, of course, it's bold to ask for help, but try to balance that with an earnest quest for self-service. Third, you want to collaborate cross-functionally. Obviously, although you have an intern project or a new grad role, half the time you're going to be looping other folks in to get stuff done. So network and connect with others, as they're going to be crucial to your success. And we're going to talk a little bit more about networking at the end. And lastly, this is super, super key. Set goals and check in with yourself frequently, right? It's important to not just set them and forget them. You really want to make sure that you're tracking yourself to the goals that you set and that you can reference them throughout your time at your internship, at your new grad role, so that you can see how you've grown and where you might need to improve or flex. Awesome. So let's get into manager responsibilities. I think this is really important to define because you want to hold your manager accountable and so they can help you grow. And in this case, manager is really, I'm just referring to anyone who is your sort of superior in the role. So at some companies, they call this a mentor, but really the person that's responsible for your growth and performance, right? And why I say hold them accountable is you need to over communicate your needs so that they are met, right? A lot of times your manager might not pick up on things, or you might not be able to, or you might not have the time to share what you need from them. And so you need to build out that time. You need to make sure that you have carved out time to be able to work with your manager on their responsibilities to help you grow. So one of the things that they're responsible for, right, are essentially providing guidance on your project. They are there to give you a North Star, align you to your deliverables, and that's really something that you need to look to them for. Secondly, they need to essentially be able to give you feedback, right? They're going to need to help you unblock yourself and address pain points in your project. Sometimes your manager might even need to help you rescope a project, right? Let's say you go into an internship or you're 6 months into your new grad role and things are not aligning as to where you expected because of the way your project was kind of mapped out. Your manager's responsibility is to help you reshuffle and figure out dynamically how to move forward. Next, they need to give you constructive feedback. We're going to talk a little bit more about feedback in detail in a bit, but constructive for us really means tangible because you need tangible feedback to keep your performance on track. Next, managers should give you the space you need to take ownership of your career, right? They shouldn't be like Big Brother watching over your shoulder. They're a mentor and a guide and a resource, but they should give you the opportunity to pave your own adventure. And that's something that you should ask of them so that you have the opportunity to be proactive and show up for what you need and bring ideas to the table. And lastly, this person is responsible usually for evaluating you for a potential return offer or a promotion if you're a new grad, right? So it's really important to sit down with this person early on and ask to have an honest conversation about how you're going to be evaluated. And that way you can tailor your goals to both your personal needs as well as your manager's expectations of you so that you're both aligned on how you get to that promotion or how you get to that full-time conversion offer. Awesome. Let's move on and talk a little bit about goal setting. So I think this is really exciting. I would love to actually have y'all think about this for a second before we jump into all the examples here, but think about the things that you want to get better at, right? What are they? Maybe if you have pen and paper open right now, or if you have notes open on your laptop, what are the things that you would want to work on? I suggest for your goal setting something really important. I suggest that you only pick 2 to 3 goals. This is because a lot of times you might walk into an internship and you want to do a ton of stuff, but it really helps to narrow down your goals so that you can focus. And then once you've checked off some of those goals, or once you've moved 2 to 3 weeks or 2 to 3 months into your role, you can decide how to evolve your goals, adding goals, taking them away, changing them. Can we go to the next slide if possible?
And then, don't want people to see our examples before they thought about it themselves.
We're ready now. Okay, cool. So here are some examples of things you might have written down, you might be thinking about right now as far as your goals, right? Some people might want to get better at public speaking and presenting. I think that's really cool because then you learn how to speak in front of a crowd or even speak in front of a crowd virtually right now, right? Others might want to work on stakeholder management. What does it look like to truly bring people together, whether it's a PM and a designer and an engineer on your team? How are you managing these relationships to drive success? Your goal also might be building great documentation that can help set others up for success in the future, both kind of in terms of recording your process, but in the actual code you write. Others might want to work on stretch projects, right? They might want to kind of improve their speed and their agility and how they're approaching their milestones so they have time for a stretch initiative at the end of the day. And then yet others might be wanting to champion company culture and serving as an ambassador for your peers or for the program that you're a part of, or getting involved in employee resource groups and kind of driving the mission in that way. So these are just some examples. I really encourage you to think about what are your priorities and what are your top maybe 3 goals for your next opportunity, because not only does that give you a sense of direction for your development, but it also helps you figure out what companies might be right for you, right? Like when you're in an interview process, when you're asking these questions to a hiring manager or recruiter, you can start to suss out, is this an opportunity that's going to provide me guidance and growth in the goals that I've set for myself. And has anyone in the chat, does anyone have a goal they want to share? Do these resonate with you? Anything that's not on here that someone thought about? No? Yes? Cool. Let us know. Keep posting in the chat. I'd love to see what some of your goals are because I'd love for that to inspire our teams as well. Awesome. Moving on. So we're on to our next big tip, taking the lead on one-on-ones. I think this is super key because even as someone that's not in a new grad role right now or in an internship, I'm constantly learning how to make the most of my one-on-one time. So let's get into some kind of specifics on how to do that. First of all, weekly one-on-ones are your meeting with your manager. Make it count, right? A lot of times you can show up to those meetings and think, oh, my manager is going to drive this, but this is an opportunity for you to be proactive about what you need and get the resources and feedback you need to then move forward. So a couple things to think about. It seems simple, but the first is have a meeting doc, right? I've heard of interns and managers who go into these conversations super casually. They just talk about what they need to talk about. There's no doc or template attached to their conversation. And then come performance review, there's no record of how they did and what milestones they met along the pace of the internship or the new grad process, right? So what I suggest is you coming to your first meeting with your manager or mentor with a template and an agenda, and then you'll really impress them and show that you're thinking about your growth. Secondly, share highs and lows from the week. This is really important because you can kick off a really productive feedback conversation by just starting to talk about things that have gone really well and then pain points or areas where you're blocked, because those things can uncover things that you need to change or improve or even continue doing more of, right? And that's in itself is really great feedback. Third, list action items after every meeting, plus anything that needs to be parking lotted. And that means essentially things that you didn't get to in that meeting, things you really want to follow up on. Make sure you have a record of all of this. Fourth, be honest and clear with your expectations, right? As I mentioned, this is your time. Make the most of it. Take the time to come into this meeting with questions, with thoughts, with reflection if you don't have a specific question, and make sure your manager is aware of all of that. And lastly, this seems simple, but I see this all the time, even in my own personal experience. Protect meeting times. Make sure that if you have an hour or half an hour on the calendar weekly, stick to it, right? It's really easy to say, oh, I'm really busy with my project this week. Oh, my manager seems busy. Let's skip. Or if you have an hour on the calendar, let's make it a 15-minute stand-up. But I think it's really important to keep this time very sacred because you should both realize the importance of having that consistent time for reflection and guidance, right? Even if one week you don't have very specific agenda items, coming in and sharing those highs and lows can, again, bubble up things that you really might want to talk about or dig deeper into. Awesome. So if we can click on, this is just an example agenda doc, right? Yours is going to look really different, but there's types of things that you can put on your agenda coming into your conversation, right? Hey, teach me this skill that you have. I really want to learn more. Or you take too long to review my diffs. You're blocking me as my manager, and I need you to help me help you so that you can unblock me. And then culturally, if there are things that you want to, express like, hey, no one wants to trade Pokemon cards with me. How do I sort of fix that? Where do I find like-minded people? And so after this agenda, right, you have an action plan. You've written down that next week, you are going to take the reins and kick off Pokemon trading lunch for your internship class. And that's something that you can look to 6 months down the road or 3 months down the road and say, I did this, I championed the mission, I brought people together. And that's a really great thing to think about when you're discussing performance. Awesome. Moving on to our next big tip. This is around giving and receiving feedback. So on the next slide, I want to emphasize that feedback is really your friend. Feedback is a scary word. I still think so, right? Sometimes there's a negative connotation around it. Sometimes you come into those meetings, they're heart racing because you think it's going to be, an indictment on who you are and your character. But really, you don't want to be like this guy. You want to take feedback in and know that it's an opportunity for you to improve and you to be more successful and you to better help make impact through your work. And at the end of the day, that is what feedback is for. So a couple things to think about as in regards to feedback is first developing a good feedback environment. And what does that mean, right? This means that you need to come into any sort of relationship in which you'll be probably providing or receiving feedback and set some ground rules about how you want to do that. You need to assume good intent and likely have a separate conversation, whether it's with your manager, a peer reviewer, a stakeholder, and say, hey, this is how I like to receive feedback. I'd prefer it real time on Slack. Or, hey, maybe we should keep a doc where we categorize the feedback that we want to give each other and reference it every couple days so that we're on track, right? Make sure that the feedback environment is aligned for both parties and that you have a good system going so that you can maintain a strong communication loop about feedback. Secondly, this is really crucial, right? We need you to essentially proactively ask for feedback. Don't wait for your one-on-ones, get it early and often, right? You could be thinking about something on Monday and you can say, oh, I wish I talked to my manager about how I think this went. Don't wait till Thursday, right? Get that information early on so that you can action on it or at least start to reflect on the feedback before you come into that one-on-one or your next meeting with this person. Third, this is kind of looping back to what we talked about earlier. Provide and ask for constructive feedback. What does constructive mean? It means specific. Specificity here is key. Because sometimes I've seen this even with my own managers. Managers will say things like, you're doing a good job, we're on track. Or they'll say, oh, things aren't looking great. Let's, figure this out and do better next time. Those are words, right? They don't tell you a lot of things about how you're actually doing. So one suggestion I have is asking proactively to split your feedback up into categories. For example, walking into your one-on-one or your bi-weekly, whenever you have time set aside for feedback and saying, hey, let's get feedback for myself across these 3 dimensions. 1, how am I doing in terms of coding ability? 2, how's my communication with other teams and stakeholders? And 3, am I able to see the bigger picture and drive towards goal? That way, if you kind of compartmentalize the feedback that you're getting, you can get more tangible information from your manager or these stakeholders and use that to action and build a really great plan to move forward, right? Fourth, this is often easier said than done, but try not to make this personal or emotional, right? Feedback in the workplace is really an opportunity for growth. And so again, come at this from a place of good intent, whether you're delivering or you're receiving feedback, and make sure that you can really take it in as an opportunity for yourself to learn. And lastly, take feedback well, listen with an open mind, evaluate the feedback, come up with an action plan in partnership with the stakeholder that's giving you feedback, and document it for progress, right? I feel like a broken record. Documentation and a paper trail is key. That way you can reference where you were and how far you got the next time you check in on that piece of feedback. And that sort of growth trajectory is really great to have on paper because you can reference it when you're talking about your own performance, your managers can reference it, your peers will know, and it also gives you a great sense of who you came into this opportunity as and the things that you still need to improve on and the things that you've done really well and shown a lot of growth in. Awesome. Let's move on. I'm going to pass the baton to Annie about honing your skills across multiple dimensions.
All right. So tip number 4. As Tuhina said before, when you're a software engineer, there's actually a lot of other traits and dimensions that you need to grow in order to become like a great software engineer besides just your technical ability. So this tip is actually 5 tips in one. But so here are some dimensions that I think were super important for me when I was getting started. So learning to optimize for impact, practicing proactive ownership, improving your craft, diving into details, and taking a part in building an enduring engineering culture. So for the first one, I think this kind of was a mindset shift for me when I first started working or interning at any company. So when you are working, you kind of have this balance and you need to walk the fine line of producing extremely like high quality, super amazing, perfect code versus being efficient. So obviously like there's an endless amount of things to do. You're always going to have more work than people to do it. So being able to kind of decide and justify kind of the trade-offs between, okay, I can either spend 10 more hours improving this and making it the most beautiful thing, the best product ever with like all the edge cases covered, etc., versus being super efficient and saying, okay, I've gotten this to a place that's good enough for us to ship and launch. And now I'm going to work on this other super high impact thing with my time instead. The next part of this is being able to quantify what impact you're actually driving. And being able to do this will actually help you understand and make the trade-offs between certain tasks that you have on your plate. So this is something that I found really interesting when I started working, because a lot of the times I'll just be like, oh, I think this is a great idea, we should do it. And then I'll go and do it, we'll launch it out there. And then at the end, my product manager or my manager will come to me and say like, okay, like what's the business impact that happened as a result of like launching this, for example, or like what is the engineering efficiency impact that you had by working on this like dev tool, for example. So being able to really quantify like the metrics that you are driving as a result of your work is going to be super helpful for both your manager and you to understand kind of like, okay, here are the things that I'm working on and why they're important. And this will also go a long way when you're doing like your annual reviews and like promotions, etc. The next part of this is time management. So there's obviously a lot of things that are going on at work. You have a ton of like social events, opportunities for like team bonding, etc. But at the end of the day, your work and project are obviously your number one priority. So being able and mindful of time management and how you're spending your time is really important as well. Last but not least, you want to be able to kind of optimize for iterating quickly and smartly. So a lot of the times when I'm starting a project, I'll first break it down into small tasks. I'll figure out exactly like, okay, here are the pieces and elements of each task that I'm unclear about. These are the things that I need to know, rather than obviously like you can spiral forever and say, okay, when I'm doing this, I need to learn this new data framework, for example. And I could spend maybe like 2 weeks learning this framework, but I really need to know that like, okay, I'm working on this timeline. Here are the trade-offs for me. Like basically I need to know only this amount to get my project done. So I'm gonna do that and kind of like push the project along. And last but not least, don't try to fix everything. Things really there's an infinite amount of things to be done, and being really clear and being able to focus on the level of impact that you're having is going to be really important. So here is some examples that I can't see the chat because I'm presenting, so I'm going to go smaller for a second. But let's say, oh no, don't look at the answer. Okay, let's say you have 10 minutes to spare while waiting for your code to compile, right? And you have two options. In this 10 minutes, I can either fix some comments so that they're more beautiful, or I can make a boring fix for this bug that's affecting millions of users. What do you all think? Now I'm gonna go look in the chat. Which one? Which one? Woohoo! Ooh, interesting, interesting. Different? Okay, great. So I also agree that in this case, it would be more impactful for me to spend this 10 minutes fixing a bug that impacts millions of users. Next example. This one is slightly a little more complex, and I think it actually happens a lot of the times when you're working on a project. So let's say you're working on a project and suddenly your PM comes to you and they're like, okay, we want to add this new feature. And then you start diving in, but you realize, okay, if I were to add this, we would need an extra week of work and delay the project by a week because it's working on super legacy code and I need to refactor things. So my options are basically 1, delay the project for a week and work on this, or 2, check with the project manager to see if this new feature is strictly necessary for us to launch. What do you all think? 1 or 2? Nice. Okay. Check with the PM. That's what I would do also. So I would first check in with the PM to see, is this feature strictly necessary, right? If it is, then like, sure, let's delay the project for a week. But I think it's always good to check and kind of reaffirm and go through your decision-making process to make sure everyone's on the same page and aligned to say, okay, why is this feature so important that it's worth this 1 week's extra work? All right, the next dimension is to practice proactive ownership. So as Tuhina mentioned before, as an engineer, it's at the end of the day, it's ultimately your work, not your manager's, and you're the one who's kind of owning your career and owning the ways that you're growing and the work that you're outputting, right? So it's really important here to basically be aware of your communication skills being able to manage both the project, either like if it's just yourself that's working on this or potentially like other engineers that are working with you. Be able to understand like how to make decisions, having a decision-making framework, understanding, okay, when we have these trade-offs, like how are we going to decide what we want to do? And last but not least, it's really important to know how to unblock yourself at a company. So I think obviously like at different companies, there's a lot of different resources. Different companies use different things, whether it's like Google Docs for design docs, Quip, etc. You might use Slack, you might use like Microsoft Teams, something like that. So being able to understand all the tools and resources that are available to you and knowing how to use those to unblock yourself is really important. So at Airbnb, for example, we have Stack Overflow for a lot of the internal questions that we ask. We also use Slack. So when I first joined Airbnb, knowing that, okay, for these types of questions, I can ask these are the team channels that we have on Slack. I'll go in and I'll post like, hey, I have this like problem. Here's what I want to solve. Is this the right place to ask? And after a while, I think of working, you'll kind of have POCs or certain people that you know are the owners of that area as well. And so being able to kind of like create that mental map for yourself to say, okay, if I have a question about messaging, then like this is the one person that I immediately go to is super helpful as well. Next one is improving your craft. So obviously, at the end of the day, you are an engineer and being really technically strong is also very important. So you should always be seeking opportunities to learn in whatever ways that you want to, whether it's learning a new part of the tech stack, working in this new framework, learning a new language, etc. In addition, knowing the tech stack that your company uses is also very important. So as you're working, a lot of times what happens is you might be a product engineer, but for some reason, like you're trying to build this new thing and you'll actually need some help from infrastructure or from data engineering to kind of make your project whole and like ship it with confidence. So after a while, you'll be able to implement features and systems quickly and accurately. And I think the last piece is being able to write quality and well-documented code. A lot of the times when I was in school, I was kind of just like last minute rushing, writing code to like get a project done, pass all the test cases. But at work, there isn't really the same sense of like, okay, once I'm done with the project, like that's it, I'll never touch it again. You're basically constantly maintaining existing projects as time goes on. So being able to really like document something well so that future engineers can come into the code and just be able to understand and be like, wow, this is super understandable is really important. And I think here, what I've learned is that a lot of the times if I'm thinking like, oh, here's a super smart way to do something, but it like makes things a lot harder to understand and readability decreases, I will oftentimes optimize for like, okay, let's do like 2 for loops instead of this like super crazy other smart thing that I want to do, just so that other people, like it's easier for someone else to come in and understand. Because at the same time, like if you jump into someone else's code, it's really frustrating sometimes when you're just looking and like nothing makes sense. Next is diving into details. So you want to be able to basically build trust with the other engineers inside and outside your team. So a lot of times that comes into being thorough and thoughtful in the way that you are coding, right? So thinking about and capturing edge cases, writing a lot of tests that are extremely thorough and you feel confident in that, like, okay, I've covered most of the cases that I want to for this certain feature, then like that's amazing. Catching your own bugs and being able to fix them before they hit production is also like amazing. I think at the end of the day, like showing that you were very thorough and thoughtful and very detail oriented in anything that you're outputting will help basically people trust you. And last but not least is to make your company a better place. So you don't have, being like at a company, you're inherently making an impact and shaping the culture that is there, right? So being able to build an engineering culture that you think fits you and making it a better place is also extremely important. So a lot of the times as you're working, you'll see, oh, like there's certain things that I feel like are missing with my team's culture. So being proactive and stepping up and kind of saying, hey, I've identified, for example, on my team that we don't celebrate achievements and accomplishments as much. We should, here's like a solution. We should once a week or once a month have like a dedicated time where we celebrate and like demo things, celebrate all of these product launches, etc. You should also take the time to connect with your peers and learn from each other. At the end of the day, you're working at work, you're working with people for like 8+ hours a day. Most of your time, honestly, is spent with your coworkers. So being able to like become friends with them and get to know them on a deeper level is really rewarding. Helping out with recruiting is also a super great way to build an engineering culture, because at that point, you're basically taking a step and making an impact on the kind of people that you're onboarding and bringing into the company as well. And last but not least, it's important to have fun. Like I said, you're spending most of your day with these people at this company. Like you should not be super stressed and like, oh my gosh, I need to like really focus on only doing work and like overburdening yourself with a ton of these responsibilities. Make sure that at the same time, like you are able to have some time to yourself, to have fun, to like get to know your peers and become friends. All right. And then Tuhina, I'll pass it off to you for tip number 5.
Amazing. Thank you, Annie, for that great overview. And also, as you can all tell, she is building an enduring engineering culture for Airbnb by being here today and helping out with this event. So I think even as an intern, right, feel empowered to go out and seek out opportunities to help, brand the company if you're excited about it, or talk about things that you've done as an intern or a new grad. There's lots of opportunities. Recruiters are always looking for support. So if that's something that is in your list of goals, then definitely reach out. But we're going to round out today's tips with expanding your networks, right? Talked a lot about people. Why is it important to get to know people? Why is it important to network across teams? So there's a couple things that I suggest. The first area is really, as Annie mentioned, introduce yourself to others, right? Your career is really half what you do and half who you meet and learn from, right? Let's be like clear that that's not scientific. 50-50 is not from some study, but as we've all worked in different environments, it's really apparent, right, that you need to build relationships. And the way that you do that is being open to introducing yourself, right? Reach out to people on Slack, find those channels where you can say, hey, I'd really like to meet you for virtual, now that we're in a virtual world, virtual coffee, and make sure that you are seeking out people that can help you grow. Secondly, watch and learn. I think this is a really interesting point, right? You have the opportunity to not just reach out to people, but also to observe mentors, peers, stakeholders that are doing really great work that you admire, and you can shadow them, right? Ask to sit in on a meeting that they're running, or ask to work with them and check out their code reviews, or even some companies allow you to sit in on interviews, right? Whether you're an intern or if you're a new grad, you can start to shadow interviews to start and see how we're building culture. So watch and learn, and then take those traits that you see and emulate them so that you can become a subject matter expert as well. 3, reach out for everything, whether it's work or personal. Seek out channels where you might find folks with common interests, right? Give yourself that opportunity early on to reach out and get the resources you need, get the friends you need, get folks who are interested in the same things you are. And lastly, come prepared. I think it's really awesome to say, hey, I'd love to have coffee with you, and set that up with 5 different people. But it really shows the other person that you care if you come with 2 to 3 really thoughtful questions, and also a goal for the end of that meeting, right? What is it that you want to learn from them? What is it that you want to take away? Do you want to come out of that meeting with an opportunity to shadow this person? And I think if you come in with those expectations, then that person will feel like they've spent good time with you, and you can make a lot out of that conversation as well. So wanted to kind of really tie the bow on this with a couple tips from recent interns. If you go to the next slide, I'm really going to let y'all process this. But I thought these 2 tips were really nice because they kind of take everything we said and package it into the idea that it's really important to own your career, bring ideas to the table, and feel empowered to use that position that you have, because you were hired for a reason as an intern new grad, right? You have a certain skill set. So bring those ideas into the table and into the fold, and take some risks, ask questions, make sure that You are taking charge of this amazing opportunity that you've been given to grow and to learn and to influence others in your opportunity. So I'd love to have y'all read through this and let us know in the chat. Does any of this resonate? We're kind of at the end of our tips. Anything that you particularly took away? Is there something that you hadn't thought of before? We would really love to know, because that not only helps us understand sort of what y'all are thinking about, but also ways in which we can change this content to meet more needs of students. So anyone in the chat, would happy to hear more about what you thought. If you have specific questions, feel free to drop them in. We'll address those in just a little bit. But did anyone maybe write down a specific goal or feel like one of the tips they maybe hadn't thought about before, whether it was how you do one-on-ones, building feedback loops, making impact? Hopefully some of that resonated with you. But before we wrap on this, I'd love to know, Annie, if you have any closing thoughts or anything that you would suggest as sort of a takeaway from all this content.
Yeah, I think obviously this was a lot of content. It can be a little overwhelming, I feel, but I think everything just like takes a little time. As long as you, like, the first step is even by being here and like listening to this presentation, taking in some of the content. Obviously, like a lot of this, if you're able to do every single one of these tips, like your career is going to be amazing. Like even now, I feel like I need to consciously remind myself, like, oh shoot, my one-on-one is coming. Like here, let me make an agenda. Here are the things I need to talk to my manager about. So I think like everything takes time, but being proactive and like consciously working on these things will get you really far. So
awesome.
That was my closing thought.
Love it. And love to see some of the engagement on the side, networking tips. Glad we found that helpful. Really awesome to hear that approaching one-on-ones was a piece that you took away. But let's really quickly, I know we're about 18 minutes left and we're going to want to leave some time to answer all the questions that you wrote. But let's take 5 quick minutes to go over some stuff about what Airbnb's been up to, and I'll try to pop right through them. So this is a quick resources slide. Hopefully I'll have the opportunity to share this deck out with all of you through URX. And so you can click in and learn a little bit more. These are some resources I found that were really helpful in kind of contextualizing a lot of this content. And then also I linked our Airbnb engineering and data science blog if anyone's interested in diving a little bit deeper on the technical side. But I did want to share a little bit more about just Airbnb and a quick snapshot. I think hopefully most of you might be familiar with what we do, but our mission on the next slide is really to essentially create a world. Oh, wait, we're not going to get there yet. Psych, we're going to show you our executives. This is our executive team. They're the ones that help us build our mission and drive towards our goal and really rally everyone together to be able to act on our goals in the community as a company. Cool. So next slide. Okay, cool. We're about to talk about our mission. So our mission is to create a world where anyone can belong anywhere, right? And belonging for us is really related to being in partnership with our hosts to help our guests find belonging and find connection, right? And that obviously is something that we really prioritize because our goal is to be united with our community to create this world that we believe will connect people across borders, across backgrounds, and make communities better at the end of the day. Awesome. So a couple quick stats. These are like maybe a year old, so things might have changed, but a huge portion of our hosts are outside of the US. So our brand is truly international and we have communities that we have to think about all across the world, which is super exciting and fulfilling. At this time, when this stat was pulled, 55% of our hosts identified as women, which is really exciting. We want to be a platform that equalizes the playing field and the opportunity for entrepreneurship for all folks of all backgrounds. So this is really exciting to see. And next, around 300 million plus nights, this is probably a lot higher now, had existed where hosts and guests are from different countries. So what that really means and what that shows you is people are connecting across borders. They're connecting with people that they may not have met otherwise through this opportunity to stay in someone's home or to engage with someone different from themselves. And that's a really beautiful thing for us. And I think our next stat is about payouts. I think, again, this number is probably a lot bigger now, but we have paid out over $65 billion to hosts, right? We are creating opportunities to grow economies, to grow communities, to grow people in their entrepreneurial pursuits. And that is also something that we want to continue focusing on as we go forward. Alrighty, this is just a really quick snapshot of our sort of org structure. I won't spend too much time on this, but I just want you to know that there are specific areas that we focus in as a company. Homes probably is the area that you all are most familiar with. Experiences is a really important area for us. How do we provide opportunities for folks to connect beyond just staying in a home, but through activities? The China business is interesting because we have to run things differently there. And Airbnb.org, which really helps us pursue our philanthropic and our community-based efforts. And all of those teams are supported by the platform teams and then the central teams, which include my team and finance, legal, marketing, etc. So that's kind of how we're overall structured as a company, which I think is always fun for people to see because different orgs do it differently. Awesome. So we're going to talk a couple minutes about embracing the adventure, because I think this year has been quite the adventure for all of us. So a couple things that we've really tried to focus on are, if you go to the next slide, around exploring new ways of connecting, right? Things have been really crazy, admittedly, for all of us, right? We're, oftentimes at home. We haven't been able to connect in person with the people that we normally would. Our travel plans have changed, but there are opportunities to still connect in this new world, right? This new normal. And one thing we launched was a couple months ago was online experiences. So opportunities to do virtual activities with people who are experts in their area and have a really good time connecting with your friends, your teammates, your peers, strangers on these experiences. So for example, for a time we were doing online cooking experiences with really famous chefs like David Chang. I've done an experience where I, meditated with sheep in Scotland. So this woman took me on a virtual tour of her beautiful farm, and then we meditated with her 3 adorable sheep. So there's tons of really cool activities for everyone. Annie, anything you want to do? Anything you've already tried?
I've done a couple of online experiences. One was kind of like a jazz night, which was actually really good. I had my doubts. I was like, I wonder how this will be, but the hosts were so welcoming. They did a really good job of basically embracing this new online virtual experience. So that was really enjoyable. It was 2 hosts in London who were just
Love it.
playing music and singing.
I love it. See, I highly encourage you all to check this out. It's super affordable, and it's a really great way to get back in touch with family and friends and also learn something new or do something cool. So another thing that I wanted to mention at the end of this, to wrap this all up, is open homes. This is actually a really important product for us. So I'll talk a little bit about what this is and how this is going to expand in the future. So we have a lot of nonprofit partners that we work with on our Open Homes initiative, and they're incredible, incredible partners that help us use our platform for good. So on the next slide, you'll see that Open Homes is really an opportunity for us to extend our core product to serve those in need in our community. And what does that mean, right? Open Homes was an initiative born out of the need to provide housing to folks in certain, humanitarian crises, right? So folks that had to be evacuated from disasters, frontline medical workers, and other first responders that might need housing, depending on what part of the world that they're working in. Medical patients as well, right? If you have a family whose, relative has to stay in a hospital somewhere far from home, where do these folks stay while their, relative is getting treatment? That's something we wanted to think about. And then also refugees, right? What does it look like to address the refugee crisis and help house folks that are in need in that way? So on the next slide, we'll share a little bit more about how Open Homes began. It really began with disaster relief, and then it sort of expanded into other areas. We had the opportunity on the next slide, I believe, to provide free housing, right? We were able to activate Open Homes for a variety of needs across the globe in partnership with our nonprofit organizations. So for the bushfires in Tasmania, for earthquake relief, or for, even already COVID-19 and frontline workers that have been addressing this crisis, we are hoping to continue to provide free housing. And the free housing actually comes through our hosts. Hosts elect to provide their homes for free during a specific time of activation. And so it's a beautiful way to engage our existing community to do something good for their own communities. Awesome. So a couple other causes for housing, as we mentioned, have kind of opened up as we started working on this program. And then the next thing that we're really thinking about for open homes is frontline stays for 2020. This year, we had the opportunity to open up 200,000 places for folks to stay. And this was, again, coming from our host community, coming from folks that had never hosted before, but wanted to provide their house for this particular reason. And 100,000 plus nights have been booked by first responders and frontline workers to be able to help them do the jobs that they so critically provide us at this time. And 40 plus government and healthcare partners have been activated around the globe to help us with this initiative. So we're really proud of the work the teams did there. And then moving forward, I think there are a couple things that are really important to us. We've kind of addressed the free stays market, but the other things we want to think about are discounted stays. What is the market for folks that potentially need a discount? What does that look like, and how do we provide that need? And then donations. During 2020, actually, we did have the opportunity for the first time to donate to frontline responders who were in need of housing. And so how do we continue to activate the opportunity for our guests and hosts who are so giving and want to give to their communities to be able to do that through Airbnb? And so hopefully we'll make some traction on this and you'll hear more. And this is just a slide on 2020 and beyond. This is super important. We've done a lot of work this year and actioned on a lot of things that are really important to us as a company. The first is we built a relief fund for our super hosts, so hosts that have really dedicated themselves to Airbnb and being hosts. And our founders contributed to that. Our employees contributed to that. Over 3,000 employees contributed their quarterly gifted travel credit to a relief fund for our hosts, which is really awesome. We are working on safe, clean, and local stays. We've launched an enhanced cleaning protocol that hosts can opt into that has been developed with the CDC and a lot of medical leaders and partners, so that folks can feel really, safe and excited to go stay in an Airbnb locally and know that they have peace of mind. Third, so this is actually really, really important to us. We are working as Airbnb to fight discrimination on our platform and make the platform accessible for diverse backgrounds of people. We just kicked off Project Lighthouse, which if any of you are Airbnb users, you've probably received some emails about, but we are trying to actively flag discrimination or similar kind of issues on our platform and address those before they happen so that we can all build a world where everyone can connect and belong. A couple other things that we've done this year, we commit to belonging in all communities. Airbnb is really active in our heritage months. We just had an incredible Pride month, and we have raised, I believe, our Pride group has raised over $4,000 for various charities through just organic giving at the company. We made a statement about DACA, and that's really important to us in supporting students who are here and trying to make the best of their time. And then as far as anti-racism and allyship resources go, we've had conversations with leading experts in the industry. Airbnb has brought in thought leaders so that we can learn from them and not make our own assumptions, but really bring in the people who are the experts in this field to help us be better allies and better members of the community looking for justice. Our company was also one of the first to make Juneteenth a national holiday starting next year. So that's something that we'll all look forward to continuing to learn about and grow through. And we've also all been given time off separate from our PTO to attend protests and to support the movement for justice. And so I think these sorts of actions are really going to help drive change. And I really hope, and I do see that Airbnb is continuing to prioritize these things. Cool. So that was a lot. I see lots of questions on the chat bar, and I'll read out some of them. And Annie, you and I can address them. You can keep the slide up. But really quickly, I see a couple questions about opportunities. When are roles going online? A quick thing to know, I do want to be very frank with this group. As you all know, Airbnb is in the travel industry, and travel has been changed significantly this year. The industry has been impacted severely. So that means our plans have changed, right? So for this upcoming summer 2021, we right now do not have any plans to hire new grads or interns aside from the folks that we had hired last year whose roles we actually had to defer to next summer already. So this was really an opportunity for us to share with you. And I think, we have no ulterior motive. We really wanted to help you learn and grow, but at this time we don't have plans for new hiring. But if that changes, we will definitely hopefully keep this group up to speed and hopefully have your contacts on hand so that we can let you know. couple other things that we see on the chat. This is a great question. What is one thing you wish that you could have done differently when you started working? Annie, you want to take that?
Yeah. Let me think about it for a second. One thing to do differently. So I think for me, a lot of it was kind of touched upon in our tips. For example, like how to have effective one-on-ones. I don't think I really fully leveraged that. My manager and I's relationship is kind of a two-way street. So instead of I'm only reporting to him, like he should be providing me with like resources, guidance, etc. And I shouldn't be afraid to like speak up and ask for it. So that was a big one for me. And I think the other one is I wish I had done this more on the first team that so like for a little bit of context, I've been at Airbnb for 3 years. I really value kind of like continuous learning and having a broad range of experience like across the entire tech stack. I'm constantly just like reaching out to other people on different teams, learning about what they're doing. So I've been on, this is my third team now in 3 years. And each time that I've switched teams, I've kind of switched roles to focus on a different part of the stack because I think for me, like that's just something that I value, which is like diversity in work and thought and like different technical abilities. So for my first year, I really would wish that I had taken more time to kind of reach out and understand what my cross-functional partners are focused on and kind of what they deem to be important. So a lot of the times when you're starting, I think obviously you need to spend a lot of time ramping up to like whatever tech stack that you're working on at the company. It's a different environment, things like that. But being able to kind of like interact with different functions, especially if you're working on a product team, I think it's a skill that I've developed and kind of like focused on within the past couple of years. But I think if I started my first year to kind of get a better understanding of like, okay, if I'm working with this designer, like now when I approach it, I'm like, okay, hi, I'm Annie. Like, let's set up some time to chat about like, okay, from this project, like, what do you think is important? What are your goals for this project? Like, how do you work? How is design doing? Like, et cetera. And getting to know and understand what these different functions value besides just like engineering is something that I think is super helpful for me. And I wish I had done that a little earlier.
That's a great point. I think
Any? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's so many other questions coming in. Thank you all so much. And, thanks for bearing with us on rambling when we have 2 minutes left. But I think my biggest takeaway for some of these questions that I'm getting is it's really important to take the time, and this is something that I'm doing now because this presentation I created reminded me to crystallize your goals and the things that you want to get out of your next opportunity, especially when you're recruiting and in this new world where everyone's trying to get by virtually and you're talking to folks and there's no necessarily opportunity for that in-person connection. Give yourself that time to develop a sense for who you are, what you want, and how you want to express that, but also what sort of questions you want to ask to suss out whether you will get those goals met by a company, by an internship, by a hiring manager, by a team, right? So from the recruiting perspective, that's something really important, I think, to continue noodling on. And I see tons of questions. I'm gonna actually ask URX team. It seems like we're gonna have to hop off in a minute. Is there any way we can take these questions and address them separately or follow up?
Yes, you can definitely take these questions. I'll go ahead and provide you with their email addresses, so you can also set up a follow-up email with this slide deck as well. So you will have more opportunities to connect with Tuhina and Annie. Is it okay if they connect with you on LinkedIn as well?
That sounds great. Yeah. And I would say that if you're connecting on LinkedIn, just let me know where you're coming from so that I can jog my memory that you came to this event. And then if you had a question in the chat, make sure just send me that question again on LinkedIn so that we can go back and get you some answers and hopefully share a little bit more with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tuhina and Annie, for your time today and sharing this awesome presentation. And hopefully everyone's ready for their next technical internship or next tech full-time role, or even like I'm not in tech, but I found the presentation to be very, very beneficial. So before we go ahead and end, I wanted to go ahead and announce the resume review winner for today's session is Philippe Cote Morneau. And I'll go ahead and send you an email connecting you with Shar from Robinhood. So congratulations, Philippe. And then next week, we have our final URX talent development program session. And this will actually feature a new college grad panel with Nextdoor, Datadog, Cloudera, and Databricks. So we hope to see you all next week. And thank you again to Annie and Tuhina for your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Hope to chat
you.
with you soon.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye, y'all. Take care.